So picture this. August 15th, 1947. After 200 long years of British rule, India is finally free. You'd think it would be a moment of pure, unadulterated joy, right? But it wasn't. This incredible moment was also wrapped in this shadow of just unimaginable pain, because the birth of a free India was, at the exact same time, the moment of its brutal, bloody division. Yeah, that celebration, it came at a truly staggering price. The country was literally split in two, creating the new nation of Pakistan, and it just unleashed this wave of violence that would end up claiming 1 million lives. So you have to ask, how did the dream of freedom turn into such an absolute nightmare? Well, that's what we're going to get into. Let's unpack the story behind the drawing of that one fateful line. The human cost, it's almost impossible to even wrap your head around. We're talking about an estimated 1 million men, women, and children killed in the horrific violence that just exploded during the partition. And the upheaval didn't stop there, not by a long shot. About 15 million people were completely uprooted from their homes. They were forced to flee, to literally run for their lives across these newly drawn borders. To this day, it's one of the largest and most violent mass migrations in all of human history. Just think about that number, 15 million. So, to really understand how something this catastrophic happened, we can't just look at 1947. It's not that simple. The seeds of this division, well, they were planted decades earlier, and they were planted as a deliberate strategy by the British Raj. And the core of that strategy was something called divide and rule. It's pretty straightforward, really. The British knew that while Hindu and Muslim communities had lived together for centuries, if they ever truly united against them, British rule would be toast. So, what did they do? They systematically worked to exploit and amplify any differences they could find, driving this wedge deeper and deeper between the two communities. Okay, so the first major test of this policy, it came in 1905 with the Partition of Bengal. Officially, the British claimed it was just for administrative efficiency, just paperwork. But the reality? It was so obvious what was happening. They carved out a new Muslim-majority province of East Bengal and split it from the Hindu-majority West. This was the very first time an internal border in India was drawn purely along religious lines. And this single act of division, it had immediate and profound consequences. It basically set in motion a chain of events that created two totally distinct and increasingly opposite political paths for Hindus and Muslims. Now, what's so fascinating here is you can see the dominoes fall, one after another, right? So in 1905, the Division of Bengal creates this new political reality. What happens next? Just 1 year later, in 1906, the All India Muslim League is formed to represent Muslim interests. And then, just 2 years after that, they demand separate electorates, basically a system where only Muslims could vote for Muslim candidates. And of course, the British were more than happy to grant this in 1909. And if you have any doubt about what the British were up to, just look at this. The Viceroy himself, Lord Minto, admitted it in private. He wrote that by creating these separate voting systems, they were sowing a fatal poison in India. And he predicted its bitter consequences. Come on. They knew exactly what they were doing. But here's the thing. Even then, unity wasn't a lost cause. And ironically, one of the loudest voices for united secular India was a man you might know by another name, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. In his early career, Jinnah was a key member of the Indian National Congress and worked tirelessly to bridge the gap with the Muslim League. He was so dedicated to this that he was actually celebrated as the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity. So, what on earth happened? How did the ambassador of unity become the man who would champion the creation of Pakistan? To understand that, we need to jump ahead to the 1930s and 40s and see how a series of political gambles and hardening ideologies pushed the whole subcontinent towards a point of no return. You see, the idea of a separate nation didn't actually come from Jinnah at first. Back in 1930, it was the influential poet and philosopher Allama Iqbal, who was president of the Muslim League at the time, who was the first major figure to publicly lay out the vision for a separate Muslim state in northwestern India. The idea was now officially on the table. But it wasn't a popular idea. Not yet. The real turning point, the moment everything changed, came with the 1937 provincial elections. And for the Muslim League, it was an absolute disaster. They got crushed. They didn't win a majority in a single province, not even in places with huge Muslim populations. Meanwhile, the Indian National Congress just swept the polls. For the League, and for Jinnah, this was a devastating political blow. This defeat changed everything for Jinnah. Right after, Allama Iqbal wrote to him, basically arguing that the election results proved that Muslims could never be safe or have power in a Hindu-dominated democracy. He insisted that a separate state wasn't just an option, it was the only way forward. And that argument hit home for a defeated Jinnah. He completely abandoned the cause of unity and began to aggressively push for the two-nation theory. Fast forward to after World War II. Political negotiations are stalling, and Jinnah decides to take his demand for Pakistan directly to the streets. He calls for something called Direct Action Day on August 16, 1946, urging Muslims all across India to demonstrate and, well, show their strength. The result was catastrophic. Direct Action Day just spiraled into what became known as the Great Kolkata Killings. It was a horrifying wave of communal rioting that left thousands of people dead in just a few days. The violence didn't stay in Kolkata, it spread like wildfire across northern India. The bloodshed got so bad that it finally convinced many leaders in the Congress Party, including people like Nehru and Patel, that a united India was just no longer possible. Partition, which was once unthinkable, suddenly seemed like the only terrible way to avoid an all-out civil war. So, with both sides now grimly accepting the inevitable, the final stage was set. But the British, weakened by the war and just desperate to get out, they executed their exit with a speed and a carelessness that would prove absolutely fatal for millions of people. Just look at this timeline. It's insane. Lord Mountbatten, the last viceroy, arrives in March to handle the transfer of power. The plan to partition India is announced on June 3rd. Independence Day is set for August 15th. But here is the most shocking part of all. The actual border, the line that would divide the two new countries, wasn't announced until August 17th. That's 2 days after independence. Can you imagine that? For 2 full days, millions of people had no idea which country they were living in. And the border itself, the Radcliffe Line, it was drawn in just 5 weeks by a British lawyer who had never even been to India before. He literally just drew lines on a map, cutting right through villages, homes, and farms, with absolutely no understanding of the human reality on the ground. So, the chaos of the Radcliffe Line created this immediate, unimaginable refugee crisis. But fracturing British India wasn't the only massive challenge facing the leaders of these brand new nations. See, the British departure also left this huge power vacuum. You had over 500 semi-independent princely states that were suddenly just untethered. They were forced to choose join India, join Pakistan, or try to be independent. On the Indian side, it was Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel who took on this monumental task of negotiating with them, skillfully putting together the political map of India that we know today. When you look back, the partition of 1947 was just this perfect storm of colonial policy, political miscalculation, and raw communal fear. Now, over 7 decades later, the wounds of that division are still there, and it leaves us with this really fundamental question, doesn't it? When history, language, and culture have been intertwined for centuries, can a line drawn on a map ever truly divide a people?